Hey everybody, this is Bo Sanders, and earlier this month I was contacted by a grad student who was doing a survey of new worship communities and places that are in revitalization projects. We would fit that here at Vermont Hills in Southwest Portland, so I thought it might be fun to put my answers up on the blog and to record a little video and explain some of it. So if anybody wants to participate in that sort of thing or to be in conversation about that, this would be a good place to start. So the first question is, what innovative practices set your faith community apart? There's two things I think that are really important to understand. So I inherited this classic mainline congregation. We never went through, this congregation in its 50 years, never went through the worship wars where it tried to do blended worship or do like worship band or anything like that. So we still sing hymns and choruses, classic songs of the faith. What I've done is I've come in and we've done a hybrid thing where I've kept that liturgical form. We have a call to worship, prayers of the people, the homily. We've kept that basic form, and then we've spliced in some newer elements of conversation, video. So we're doing kind of an ancient future thing. I call it retro futura. That hasn't really caught on yet, but hopefully it will. Where we're trying to combine the best of the tradition that has brought us here, and but some of the newer things. So it's kind of interesting. We have this kind of centuries old elements and 21st century elements, but we kind of skipped what most people know of, like the post World War II updates to church, where we don't have the kind of evangelical, charismatic, hill songification of the church going on. We're just doing old and ultra contemporary, but we've skipped that middle stage. So it's really interesting. The second thing is that the first Sunday of every month we do communion. And so this is gonna be our 8th communion since I got here in July. And it's different every time. We try something different every time. My favorite one so far is in January. We set up 5 tables around the corners of this sanctuary. We don't have a square sanctuary, so we have 5 corners. And one out here in the entryway. And so when it was time for communion, we broke up into groups of 8 or 9 around tables, and we communed. And we served each other communion and talked about the most powerful or memorable time of communion we've ever had, or just what's our favorite part of the significance of the imagery. It was a really great time. Tomorrow we're actually doing a fun thing where we're calling back and forth across the space from the communion table to the conversation table. We're calling back and forth. We're going to use the Great Thanksgiving, where you say, peace be with you, and then somebody else says, peace be also with you. And then you say, lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. It is good and right to give praise to God. We give praise to God. So we're going to call back and forth across this empty Korah here, which is the cup of Christ, waiting to be filled. We see that in the womb of Mary, may it be unto me as you have said. We see it in the perichoresis of the Trinity, always leaving room in the middle in that divine dance of the Godhead. So we're going to be really dramatic and poetic with a lot of theatrics and pomp and circumstance. It's going to be really fun, but that'll be our first time kind of doing something that formal and grand. The second question is, how does your faith community meet people where they are, literally and figuratively? So one of the great aspects about doing Church in the Round or Church 2.0 is that it is interactive, it is participatory, people get to contribute. So one of the things about providing a safe space is that whether you are young or old, married, single, divorced, if you have kids or don't have kids, if you're widowed, if you've never had children, if you're an empty nester, if you're gay or straight, black or white, Christian or non, your opinion matters. It contributes to the conversation. Your unique perspective is valued. Because we are Methodists, we follow John Wesley, and that Wesleyan quadrilateral says that Scripture, tradition, reason, and experience are all valid locations for God's revelation. Your experience tells us something about the great divine, the revelation of God in the world. We actually can't know how God is revealing God's self in the world without comparing notes with other people. I can't accurately see who I am without your eyes. And so there's just a beauty of being in conversation that is very different. That also helps us to practice going out into the world, not to evangelize people to make them more like us, but to open our ears and listen to their stories so that we can enter into the things that are really of concern to them. And so that evangelism is actually reverse evangelism, that we would be converted to what's going on in their life and to take on the heart of Christ in that. So it is very different. I just had a seminary class here last week looking at how we do church, and it confirmed everything I've been saying. This is not a shtick. This is not a gimmick. This is actually a different way to do and be the church. And that was confirmed because when you think about moving from a stage show where you sing 6 or 7 songs that are up on the PowerPoint, you have a worship band, then you have a sermon, and then you have a time of response, and then everybody goes home. Converting from 1.0 to 2.0, when you watch the gears turn in people's head and try and figure out, like, how would we even do that? How would we even incorporate these different elements? You can see that this is a different ecclesiology. It's not just a different expression, worship expression. It's actually a different view of the church. The third question is, and like for instance, we had this conversation table. The last couple of weeks, we've had 6 groups that we support or partner with come to the table and tell us about what they do, why they do it, and how we can partner with them and participate and be good neighbors. Just promoting those voices and elevating those perspectives means that we're not in complete control of the content, that the church is not in charge of everything that's said. We host a space, but we don't provide all of the contact. It's a wonderful way to hear other people's passions and experience, their giftings and graces. It's really, in my mind, it is the future of the church. The future of the church is not a stage show. I keep saying that. Third question, how does your faith community develop and equip young leaders? And then they gave a bunch of examples. So we have a really unique opportunity. I was a seminary professor last year, and some of my students who are doing Masters of Theology or MDiv have come and participate with us. So there's a bunch of ways to include them. We also have a young minister in training. He's going to be with us for probably 1.5 years, 2 years. He'll eventually be appointed someplace. So we have this really awesome situation where I've also inherited some seasoned saints at this church who are really mature people of faith. And all you do is every week you have a different person come to that table, sit across from you, and talk about something that they are passionate about or something they've been looking into, or something that relates to the scripture for that week. And by doing that, you promote different voices and give them experience. So we do the same thing with Wednesday night Bible study for progressives. We can do the same thing in Sunday school, depending on what the topic is. When you have conversational church, lots of different people get to contribute in unique or different ways. Just this week, we have a new person who has a background in creative writing, and she's going to take on the prayers of the people so that I provide her some things that are going on in the congregation, and she's going to craft the prayers of the people so that she gets to use her writing gift. So there's a lot of different ways to incorporate young people or people who are lay ministers, because, like I said, it's not pastor focused. By decentering the sermon and the sermon not being the main event, the spotlight of the gathering, you really get to promote other things, whether that's the challenges of being a young parent, whether that is ecological issues. This past week, we heard an amazing sermon. I'll post a link to the podcast when it comes out. We heard an amazing sermon about creation care and how God reveals God's self in nature. And that was by one of our young seminarians, and she just did an amazing job. Okay, those are my 3 answers. I would love to hear how you're doing it in your context, or some feedback from me. Let me know any questions or things I need to follow up on. I'm really enjoying being part of this conversation again.